Yeah, I think people were just so excited to have a Star Wars movie again that you kind of ignored the flaws in the film. And for me, it it really didn't take shape till Attack of the Clones came out, and then you're like, oh man.
Welcome to the 611 Films podcast. My name is David Groves, is one of your hosts, and with me as always,
Neil McKay, what is happening?
what's going on, man? Hey, we got a good friend of the podcast, good friend in general. We got Ryan Cunningham all the way from Maryland talking to us today.
What's up, guys?
What's going on? Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Today's a big one. It's the childhood. It's y'all's kind of like, it is kind of your thing. I mean, a big fan of it, but not the biggest fan. I think you guys are really big fans. It's all about Star Wars today.
That's true. Well, we're not cosplay people or anything like that by any. So we're not.
What are you talking about?
Not yet. He's got
my lightsaber right here.
I'm gonna say we're not extreme Star Wars fans, like where we know all the trivia and all that stuff. But yeah, so that was going to be the thing today, kind of talking about the movies we grew up with, the original trilogy, and then kind of the hoopla of all of that, and then kind of moving our way through the timeline all the way to today with the shows they're doing on Disney and everything like that. Just kind of general thoughts on all of it, why we think it's such a phenomenon, and just stories of like kind of growing up with that stuff.
Right.
So kind of all things Star Wars.
Real quick run through that. You guys, childhood friends, knew each other in grade school, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I guess kind of figured at some point, you found, I mean, Neil and I have talked endlessly about the movies that shaped us and got us into filmmaking. What got you guys like finding out that we're both real big Star Wars fans? Was it when you kind of first met, or?
I think it's just so in like part of the culture, and then just all of it's just a part of life. It's almost like, well, how did you find out you like hamburgers? It's like, I don't know. It's like,
I'm always there.
It's just Star Wars, man. Like, I
was gonna say, but like, Ryan, do you know, like, when you found out, like, oh, this is like my thing, this is like the thing that I love, or like, your dad got you into it or something like that?
I have memories of, I was born in 77, the year the first film came out. And I have memories of I didn't obviously go to the theater to see that, but my memories are being in my grandparents' house, watching it on the television and seeing that scene with the binary sunset, the two suns, and Luke as he looks over, and just being like in awe of Neil's got the picture. And I just thought that was such an awesome thing. It to me, the film just, connected with me in a way that other sci-fi had not from that era. My uncles watched Star Trek, and I remember watching that. But there was something about this film that was different. I think it connected with young people for a variety of reasons. The puppets is one reason, the creatures, and there's just. That's my first memories are actually watching on, I believe, VHS tape, and being just in awe of what I would. There was nothing else like that. There was no other film like that at the time.
And
sure.
And I know I've said this story a few times on the podcast, but I saw it like when I was like 6 years old, and I got all freaked out by that when they're in Mos Eisley, and it's like, my friend don't like you, I don't like you either.
Yeah.
And I got like nightmares. I mean, not nightmares, but I was like all freaked out. But I remember like everything else I just loved. Like, it was just so inventive and so cool. And I mean, I guess that's kind of the first question is like, why did it become so popular? And it's kind of like, Ryan, what you're saying is like, there's nothing like it. I was trying to go back and think. I mean, that kind of brought in the dawn of like the whole 80s, like crazy sci-fi stuff. And there was just a lot of original content that came after that, like E.T. and, and everything like so. But before that, I mean, I know you had sci-fi stuff, like you said, like Star Trek, and then you had like, the Day the Earth Stood Still and these, cheesy like 50s movies. But something like that, where it's like, this is sci-fi, but it's cool and it's awesome and it's like an action. And
I mean, it was a perfect storm. You get a movie with a, great story, great, great score. Let's not like shout out to John
Yeah.
Williams. I mean, I can't imagine that film without him, or any of the films without him.
Mm-hmm.
And it had all the elements you need to make a
Yeah.
blockbuster. I mean,
Speaking of,
And it could have been one of those films. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, just the John Williams thing. I'm sure he'll come up later, but I just saw this on YouTube. It was kind of crazy, where somebody was comparing something like some German composer did something back in like the 20s, and it was like, oh, I think John Williams got a lot of inspiration from this. And it's weird. It's called The Planets. I can't remember the guy's name. You could Google it or something. But if you listen to some of the stuff, you're like, holy crap, this sounds a lot like Star Wars music. And I think people didn't like it at the time. They were like, what is this? This is pretentious garbage. And then John Williams is like, no, this could be like an epic score, for a movie.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, just an interesting aside.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I think it started where, there was always like sort of in the 80s, and maybe it started kind of in the 70s. I'm latching onto a little of the Tarantino. It's like, there's obviously the movies that go to theaters. There's the very few networks and the TV shows. But I do think like an ABC or NBC, CBS at the time, I mean, it's not like today where it's TNT, TBS that are just replaying this shit ad nauseum. It's either Marvel, Star Wars, or Harry Potter that just plays on these channels over and over again. But it'd be like cool because if you didn't own the VHS, they might be playing Star Wars or Empire or Jedi Sunday night movie. Like I remember they did that a lot on Saturday nights and Sunday nights where they just in the early 90s just play big movies.
Yeah, because that's how I'm sure how Ryan and me saw it. I think I saw it. It was like one of the first TV airings or something like that. I don't know, one of those like Sunday night movies things. And then Ryan said he saw it on VHS. Because you're right, that was back then. They didn't just play it on TV. It was like a special thing. Like if you didn't see it in the theater, you had to figure out.
Yeah, it was a big thing as a kid. If you didn't, like I said, you couldn't really buy VHSs until about the mid to early 90s when video stores would be just like, we have an overload of them. Blockbuster would have an overload, and you could actually just buy a VHS. And
yeah, I think you're right about that, Dave. I if my memory serves correct, the VHS I watched was actually taped off of television.
Yeah.
Was what I was
had
watching.
That too. Yeah, I think I had Empire or Jedi. I don't remember what it was, but I think my dad, take the VHS record, like the actual thing, and set it to a channel, and you could record. We had quite a few of those. I don't think that was legal, but at the same time, we weren't selling them. We weren't selling these things.
That's true. You weren't
for our own, enjoyment and watching them.
Yeah, there was a whole thing of rights back then too. Because I mentioned ET a minute ago, but I think until like the early 90s or late 80s, they never released ET after it was released in 82. So they would just kind of do a re-airing of it in the movie theaters, like at Christmas time or something like that. And they didn't put it on like VHS until like years later, because it wasn't just guaranteed like that. Like, movie goes to, Errol's or Blockbuster or whatever it was, the video store.
I think my biggest Star Wars thing was like, my dad, when they started releasing the trilogy, the first trilogy, I think like this had to have been like 95, 96. It was sort of a ramp up to get to the prequels, but then they re-released them in theaters like a year or two before. Mm-hmm. Like I was telling you guys, like I think I remember 97. I don't know if they released all of them, but I went to see Empire with my tennis team. And it was just kind of like fun to see in the theater, but it's like, it feels like, this is a reason you're doing this now to get to the prequel.
Yeah, I think coming up. I remember seeing the New Hope, the original Star Wars, and the re-release in 97. So I think it was like 97 they released them, or 97, 98, or maybe 96, and I just caught it in 97. But I think it was George Lucas had the ability to do special effects at that time that he didn't have the ability to do in the late 70s or early 80s. And I have made a point to say that's not necessarily a good thing, because he made some boneheaded decisions with these movies that I just go, I don't understand this. But like the Jabba the Hutt scene, which I think I brought up on the last podcast,
Yeah, I think that and I didn't know all the different effects that he was redoing or for the re-release. Like it's felt like such a marketing gimmick though to get everyone excited about the prequels. And I don't know if that's like true, but it felt that way. I don't know if you guys went to see all those, and because it was 99 that Phantom Menace came out, and that was so much hype for that.
Yeah, they did. There was new stuff that they had with like the matte screens, like where the backgrounds would look more. I don't know. When it came out, when Phantom Menace came out, in
Like more
99, it was those
polished.
yeah, more so than you could do back in the day. But it also had that everybody was like, oh, you could tell that CGI because it just looked like almost cartoonish or like somebody painted it, not really like it's a real background. And he was messing around with that, and he was starting to do that in the re-releases. And that's when I say matte technology, I mean that's it's like you have something in the foreground, and then you replace the background, and then you replace something else in the background, and then you would have like when they were going through like Mos Eisley, like it in the original it was just like them on a speed writer or something, and then now there's like aliens everywhere, and you're like, what the hell is this? It looks like somebody like there's just like aliens like for no reason at all, just like bumbling around in the background. You're like, is this necessary?
I mean, silly. Is that sort of, and again, not to jump ahead or anything, but is that sort of the future of what we saw with the prequels where Lucas and everybody just did everything on a green screen, blue screen? It's kind of when high def came in. I mean, where were you guys when like the whole Phantom Menace? I mean, it was big. I think everybody was really into it that I knew of, but nobody was a big Star Wars fan. So like, was that huge for you guys seeing it in 99?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. I remember Neil at the time was working at the movie theater that we actually saw that showing at when that movie came out, and he got to see an early screening of it. And you didn't spoil it for me, Neil, but you were like, "It's awesome," It's so
yeah. It was
that was your yeah.
It was very strange. There's definitely like a cognitive dissonance with the movie because I do remember that. Like I was just so excited about Star Wars, and I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, it's awesome!" And then like a week later, I saw it again, and was kind of like, "Was it though?" And even like watching it, there was moments where I was like, "I don't know about this." Like it just seemed very like the original was just very simple, like good versus evil, and then this was like there was like a trade federation and like all this politics, and you're like, "What?" Like I don't know what's going on. And it just seemed like very stiff and boring. But I think at the end, when you had that awesome fight with Darth Maul and everything, it was just like, oh, whatever. It was so cool. But there's definitely like when you are so excited about an event, you just don't care. You're just like, oh, that was awesome. And then you kind of look back and you go, oh, yeah, okay, that really wasn't as good as I remember it. And then.
Yeah, I think people were just so excited to have a Star Wars movie again that you kind of ignored the flaws in the film. And for me, it really didn't take shape till Attack of the Clones came out, and then you're like, oh man, you're like, because you were like, well, maybe they'll have better dialogue, and maybe this older Hayden Christ or sorry, the older Anakin character, would be better than the young Jake Lloyd, and then they cast Hayden Christensen, and I mean, sorry to everybody who thinks he's great, but
it just there's an inherent thing that kind of gets ruined there with like when you have a villain like Darth Vader and then you show him as a kid. It's like if you showed Freddy Krueger as a kid, like there's going to be a mystique lost there too. So
yeah, and that was also too that, and I think it's happening now. I mean, look at like Game of Thrones. Look at I think I just read something with like Hunger Games. Like everything now is a prequel, and I'm like, I know Better Call Saul is supposed to be really good. I couldn't really get into it because, again, it's just like there's just that feeling of prequel where it's like, I know what's going to happen, though. So I mean, it is interesting to see how it all came to be. And that poster of Anakin with the like shadow of Darth Vader, I thought that was really badass and cool. But it's just, and cool for doing the prequel, but it just felt so weird. It's still to this day, still like for me, when they go, yeah, we're going to do a prequel. It's like, why? We already know what's going to happen. I don't know why, and I still can't get over that in my head.
Yeah, I agree. I think, in fact, I was just talking to Ryan about that very thing with the Game of Thrones, the House of the Dragon, and just how prequels are so tough because you do have this inevitable like, okay, what? Yeah, who cares? Like, I know what's going to happen. That's why, like, I kind of hated the movie Titanic because it's like the boat sinks. We're spending 3 hours on this. We know what happens. Like, it's like, what's the hell's the point? Yeah, it's really tough to do. I mean, sometimes you can get creative and inventive and show new things that you never knew before of like how events happen. But yeah, it's like ultimately, you know what's going to happen in A New Hope, and you can't deviate from that. So like there's no surprises. Yeah. So it's just
and the technology is so different. Like you're saying with like how he's, and that's why I was saying like how Lucas is the technology got just so much better. And 95, nice, like after they started with, I guess, ILM and his big effects company. And it's like, yeah, we can now make these better. But it's just so funny to me to see such a very like non-film, non-gritty, that 70s look of something, and then now let's make it high def, and that's when high def was still like, I mean, now cameras are, still $90,000, but it's like that was as good as it got, and it's just so poppy, and it just didn't look and feel like the old school Star Wars.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, and you could see that with the re-releases, like just the way they were making the planet Tatooine look just so like cartoonish. And it lost all the grittiness of the originals. And yeah, it just didn't. And then, I mean, shit, like Ryan was saying earlier about the puppets. I mean, those things look realer than the CGI did. Like,
oh yeah, the puppeteering, animatronics, all that stuff for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean that stuff was way better back in the day than like whatever the hell Jar Jar Binks, whatever that thing is, that monstrosity.
That monstrosity.
Just getting back to the original trilogy, the grittiness is what made that stand out from a lot of the other sci-fi films of that time. I mean, it was like the Millennium Falcon is this ship that's like a piece of junk, and you have to bang on the panel to like get it to start up. It's like an old car. I mean, that was such a big part of the mystique of the originals, and then totally the prequel trilogy got rid of all that, and
it became so colorful. And I was like, what is this? Is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the iconic scenes that I'm thinking about, like you just said with the binary sunset, and then the classic scene at the end of Empire Strikes Back where Luke loses his hand, Luke, I'm your father. Like that was all like dark, black and white, practically. Like, and then all of a sudden Phantom Menace comes out and it's like pastels and just color. And I was like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
I do think there was a story to be told, though. I mean, everybody wanted to know why Anakin turned to the dark side. So, I mean, nobody actually knew the answer to that question. So that was the big question of the prequels: is why does he turn? And so, I mean, that did have an interesting, question to explore there.
It has been a good 20 years now, and we've already had another sequel trilogy and now all these Disney shows. But I do think that there's something to be said. Everybody's mentioned the Jar Jar thing, the Hayden, the kind of wooden acting that he did. I mean, look, not to knock the guy, but it is sort of like kind of widely known that it wasn't that great. But I don't know, is that actually George Lucas directing? Is that the style they're going? Was it because they weren't actually in the desert filming a scene? And it's just, again, nowadays I feel like everyone just goes into a big ass studio like the Marvel movies, and they know they've got to like deal with a stick and a bunch of tennis balls on it, and it's a dragon or it's a this. But back then, it's hard to act when you're not actually on a set or feeling like, things around you. It's like, no, we're going to do it all digitally. That, I think, could affect that.
That's fair. I would agree. Hayden wasn't the only one who came off looking bad. I mean, Natalie Portman had some terrible lines. She probably had the worst lines of anyone. You're breaking my heart, and hold me like you did by the lake on Naboo so long ago.
Yeah,
when there was nothing but our love.
Not
I
to
mean,
mention, too, he
geez.
was like a
Oh God.
child when she was like an adult, and then there was that weirdness. I guess everybody was
Yeah,
like,
that
"Wait a
was
second,
a
huh?
little strange.
Wasn't he like
Maybe
a
even
7-year-old?"
yeah, there was okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but okay,
like,
but it's cool.
the
So
whole
he's an
other thing
adult
was,
now. He's an adult
yeah.
now. It's okay. But Natalie
Um,
Portman still looks like an 18-year-old at the. I mean, I think she was,
but yeah, I
but
mean,
it's just funny.
it even Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor were snooze fests. Like they were just boring characters. So it wasn't just the act. I mean, and these are great actors. It's like you
Yeah.
can't just be like, oh, Jake Lloyd and Hayden Christensen sucked.
Right.
I mean, no, it was just they didn't really have great character material to work with. And I've tried to figure this out myself. Like, how is it the original so good, and I mean, I'm not saying that. I mean, the dialogue was better, but it wasn't like going to win an Academy Award in the original trilogy. But the characters were so much better. Like Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia. They were so much better than what we had in the prequels. And I don't know like where that came from or how that happened, but I mean that's definitely
Well,
part
Neil
of it.
and I, we've actually kind of talked about that before, and I do think we've mentioned before. It's when you get that big, like when George Lucas gets that huge and makes such that kind of money, it's like a child actor becoming so famous, a Macaulay Culkin or anybody. It's like, there's the narcissism, there's just this feeling that I can't do any wrong. There's all of that, and there's no one really there to tell him no.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I've said that before. Yeah. Lucas in the '90s never had somebody to tell him no. All he had was he was surrounded by yes men, and that's a problem. I mean, I think you need somebody to like kick your ass and be like, no, dude, this sucks. Like, make it better, and not just kick your ass, not kiss your ass. That's what you need.
Yeah.
And he didn't really have that. I think there's like a YouTube video, like footage of him like watching it, and he was like realizing like, oh, this movie doesn't work. And it's like, yeah, because nobody told him, like, dude, you're editing this thing. It doesn't make sense. It's all over the place. It's a mess.
Yeah.
And he had so many struggles with the original, like over budget, crap breaking down, the puppets don't work, just everything's going wrong. They're in the desert. People are dying of not dying, they're having a heat stroke, just all of these things. And their genius kind of perseveres with that. But when you have everything like just handed to you and you have all the money in the world to do whatever you want, I don't think you're going to make as good a project as when you have to struggle to make something.
Yeah.
So
Sure. So I mean, then fast and hey, just to kind of keep things moving. I mean, fast forward and it's 2000 whatever it was, 12, 13, 14. Oh, another one's coming. J.J. Abrams is going to start it, and then there's like this mass hysteria once again, just like the prequel. So like, I mean, Ryan, if you want to jump in, like after the prequels had been out and been seen, and then they were playing on TNT and TBS over and over again. I mean, is there still that feeling of like? I think there is the euphoria, that fun of let's do it again. Did you have that?
I did. Yeah. I mean, I was hopeful because I knew it wasn't in George's hands anymore, and it was. So I'd liked the Star Trek reboot that JJ did, and I was hopeful that they had talked about going back to like sets, less CGI, and going back to puppets and stuff. So I mean, the buzz about that film there was a lot to be excited about, and frankly, I wasn't. Even though the story was mundane in the Force Awakens, it satisfied me. I was thrilled. I mean, I thought they got it right. The humor was back. There was a lot of things that movie did right, even for what you can critique it on. I was pumped.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of what you guys are saying. I came away with it definitely. I was satisfied as well, but I do remember thinking like, yeah, that was kind of like just a reboot of the original Star Wars, just with new characters. It didn't really go off the rails for me until like the next one and the next one. That's when I was like, okay, what are you guys doing? And it did felt very disjointed. Yeah. Like you're not going for a final goal. Especially when your villain, the Adam Driver, the Kylo Ren, is this kind of bratty, up and coming, like I'm gonna be the next guy, but he's not. and what was it? Snope was the, and
Mm-hmm.
then they just killed it off in like the second one, and it's like, wait a minute, so now Kylo Ren, this bratty like kid who still needs to learn some stuff, is now supposed to be like the new Darth Vader, and it was just weird, and it's like, so what the hell was the point of the Snoke character? And I know Ryan and me go with it, but then just bringing back the Emperor, I think, kind of killed. I mean, I was just like, you got to be kidding me with this shit. In the third one, in the last one, is you just basically, I wouldn't say you ruined the legacy of the originals, but you definitely like put a knife in the back of them. Because the whole point was like the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, and then you just like undid that by having the Empire come back or the Emperor come back. And it was just, I don't know, and it just. And because of his bloodline, this Rey character can just learn the Force and not like have to be trained like Luke was and like Anakin was.
And didn't she do like a quick little montage in the forest? Like, oh, you got to train. Like Leia was saying, you got to train, and she does like a week, and she's like, okay, I'm good, I got it.
Well, I thought because she had no memory that maybe it was brainwashed. Like she did learn all this stuff, and then it was like it was coming back to her. But no, they just basically said, no, you're a Palpatine, so you can just do this shit. It was like, come on, man. Like, so, there was just a lot of, and I think that was the people's problem with it was a lot of disjointed storytelling, a lot of loose ends, a lot of like things that didn't get paid off. And then just subplots that were like silly, like the Finn with the girl and their whole side adventure thing. I can't remember her name.
Oh yeah.
Finn was the stormtrooper.
Rose.
Yeah. And then there was this whole thing in the third one where they were like, it was like, what is going on here? And they almost like screwed the whole thing up, like, and got everyone killed. And it was just, it was
like, that. Let's
weird.
have now 3-4 different stories in the middle of the trilogy, and so then they come back till like the last one, and that's one of those things that Stranger Things is doing. Like everybody does that now too, and it's like, no, the fun is having everybody kind of more or less together and fighting together, and that jubilation or that feeling of rah rah kick ass, you got to earn that, and you can't earn it when they're just off doing something else that does not have anything to do with the story or the rest of like the story as a whole.
And I think I don't know who said this, if this was like some YouTuber or like Critical Drinker or something like that, but I remember hearing like it's an absolute crime that they didn't have at least one little scene with Leia, Han, and Luke, and that's true. You had those 3 actors, right? You couldn't get them in the same place at the same time for like a second. Yeah. Like, come on, man.
The hero's death or that feeling of was it a worthwhile death? You got Luke that's on another planet and he looks like a disheveled mess, and Han just gets killed so quickly, and it's just it doesn't have any resonance because there was no duel, there was no feeling of you knew each other. Leia, doesn't she just fly off the spaceship or something? You know what I mean? Like, it didn't have the hero's feelings of wow, I'm going to go out to save someone, or I'm going to do this to really, I don't know. That to me is what Star Wars would be cool about it, is these hero deaths that matter and mean something.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think you're referring to the Leia Poppins scene where she's out in outer space and
flying around.
Yeah, and then she uses the Force to somehow to come back into the ship. Just cringeworthy there.
I'm like, tragic that obviously that she did pass away when she did. So I mean, I'm sure there was ideas that she would be in the third one too, and then they kind of had to
They had that. Yeah, there were a lot of problems with that. I think first and foremost, as we found out after the fact, there was no cohesive story written for the 3 films. Like, basically, JJ wrote, or I think it was Lawrence Kasdan who wrote The Empire Strikes Back, wrote that script for The Force Awakens, and then they just kind of left it up to the next directors. And I think you see what happened as a result was just, like you said, a disjointed, kind of cobbled together story, and it just didn't work. And
Yeah,
boy,
it's
they really.
almost like feeling like, hey, everything is getting thrown out there. So, like, we need to also do that. Now, let's also make sure there's Rogue One in pipeline. And they knew probably the Disney takeover was getting in. And I'm sure in a couple minutes we'll get into now all the Disney shows and everything. But I do
Right.
think that it's so funny how, like, there's such this love of this canon, of this story and all this stuff. But it's always like, oh, why can't they figure it out though? Can't get it right, and we're always kind of ugh.
Well, it's. I mean, it's everybody's chasing the dragon. I mean, you have lightning in a bottle with the original trilogy, and then everybody's trying to recreate, and get that feeling back, that nostalgia, and it's never going to work. It's never going to be as good as the first time. So, I don't think anybody would ever be happy with anything anyone did. Like, I don't think there's like a magical, like, hey, what about this? And then everyone's like, oh, that's great, it's even better than the original. Like, no one, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
One of the best comments I ever read online was, nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. And I think it's so true. I mean, there's just like hand wringing within the fan community about all these films, and it's almost amusing. But you're gonna get some. They're gonna swing and they're gonna miss and they're gonna have a few hits. So that's how I look at it.
But like I said, now going into there's the Rogue One, which I actually enjoyed. I thought Rogue One was pretty good, just as a story by itself. I don't know if you guys had opinions on that one, just to get into.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I think that's the strongest of the standalone films they've done since the sequel trilogy. So
it's not hard to beat Solo.
Well, it's not. Yeah.
That was
I didn't even remember that was a thing until you just brought it up.
I think Solo was so bad they scrapped like other standalone film ideas because they were just like, nobody wants to see this. But Rogue One was a great movie. My only knock on it was just back to what we were saying with like prequels. It's like when you know how it ends. It's like, and it does literally end right when New Hope starts. So, I mean, it was a cool ending, but to see what we saw with like Darth Vader and Princess Leia and stuff. But
I didn't even know what it was about. I mean, again, to follow some of that stuff and to know the lore and the canon of all these things, I was just like, I didn't know until the very end. Oh, this is the back. Like, this goes back to stuff from the original, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, that's like it ends right the very second New Hope like starts. So that was kind of cool, but at the same time, it's like I know how this is going to end. It's just interesting.
And they're doing the spinoff with crap, I'm losing this. Diego Luna.
Oh, right.
Oh, is that the Andor
spinoff with his character too now?
Yeah.
So we've got that. We've had Mandalorian. We've had Boba Fett. We've had
Obi-Wan.
What's Obi-Wan now?
Obi-Wan.
Which I heard.
And talk about just a silly
Obi-Wan.
That one's just silly because you have all these fights with like in that show with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, and it's like this is so stupid. We know that neither one of them can die because otherwise we don't have a New Hope. So, and that show is just I wanted to give it a shot, but like I'm just like, what the hell? What is this? It's just like, what is happening? I don't know.
Again, it's the fever of it's the problem with the prequel. It's the idea that you can't do anything different or change anything because we already know the source material is already there. So,
but then, like I think a lot of people liked The Mandalorian. That was probably my favorite thing they've done on the Disney, show aspect, because they did it with the freedom to kind of do like because it was a whole other like side thing.
Side character.
So it wasn't really influencing.
Isn't Boba Fett kind of that way too? Like he was just such a side character, but
that was a much weaker show than it would. In fact, like they basically just said halfway through the season, we're just going to go back to doing the Mandalorian.
I heard that.
Like, what is happening?
Yeah,
Just like,
I've
forget
seen,
Boba Fett. We're gonna go.
yeah, like you said, like some of the stuff on YouTube with like pitch meeting with Ryan George and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, we're just gonna forget about Boba Fett for a couple episodes because I love the Mandalorian so much, and we should go back to
Yeah,
that.
it's
And
like
what about Baby
we're bringing
Yoda?
back Baby
Oh, the
Yoda. It's like,
moneymaker! Oh, the moneymaker!
moneymaker.
Yeah,
Moneymaker.
we got to have those toys ready for Christmas. Come on, bring them back.
Yeah. So here's a question to Ryan, because I'm as Star Wars fans, and I know this is a 2-part question. I know, Dave, this is a question you were going to ask us, so let's just go ahead and get to it. But part one is this a good idea, or should they leave it well enough alone? And I mean, going all the way back to like, the re-release of the originals and the prequels and all of this stuff. And 2, when do we just stop and go, enough of this bullshit? This is just getting ridiculous. Look, I'm out.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. I mean, if I had my way, I'd say, George, leave it alone and don't just leave the 3 original movies. But that's not the world we live in. So I mean, I'm not surprised that these things happen. There's too much money to be made. So none of it shocks me. As far as being, when is it enough? I don't know. I'm one of those guys who's always going to be intrigued, and I'm probably going to go for it. There's too much nostalgia with my childhood that there's too much I've invested, over the years. I'm a sucker. I'm going to go back.
We're having technical difficulties over here, so we've lost Ryan, so we can't actually say goodbye to him. But we do want to say thanks for being on the show, and it's been a blast talking about all things Star Wars.
Ryan, thank you so much, and see you on the next one.
See you on the flip side.